Ooh, very cool. Is this a guitar pick? I'm joking, this is not a guitar pick, nor would you want to use it as one. We have coral today. It's a cold one today. It's rainy and cold outside and it's cold back here and I want some soup.
Then wouldn't you rather be at the beach?
Wait, the way you said that, what's going on? I am such a passive beachgoer. I just want to sit there for a little while. Half shade, you know what I mean? Like I'll stick a limb out for 15 minutes and then I'll stick another limb out. I'm not gonna nap either, I'm just gonna be there. Box with a clue. Everything's better down where it's wetter, under the sea. The stute play the flute, the carp play the harp, the bass play the bass, and Rob unbox. Ooh, the bass sound is sharp. We have coral today. I'm getting throwbacks to our Gemstones of Florida episode. We covered coral a little bit there if you want a little bit more of that action. But stick around and you'll find out a little bit more. So we've got a couple of things here in front of us today. We have a little cameo pin. It's a raised carving, very old, ancient style of jewelry and adornment with precious and semi-precious stones. We've got some coral stems here, and we've got a nice coral bead bracelet. So a nice little variety here to start out. So coral is one of those few types of gemstones that we label as organic, and that means that rather than resulting from natural geologic processes, they're actually derived from living organisms. Things like amber from trees, ancient trees, pearls that form in the shells of mollusks, and coral, which was itself once alive. Coral is a sea creature. Some people call them the flowers of the sea. They grow in all kinds of varieties, shapes, colors. Some have stinging tentacles, others look like big old brains with wrinkles in them. Here's a fun fact. Coral only covers 1% of the ocean floor, yet it is home to 25% of all ocean life. Coral is important. Most coral that you see while it's alive, underwater, thriving, living its best life, is very wavy and undulating and very soft. They have soft outsides, soft exteriors, but on the inside they have a rigid calcite or aragonite kind of support structure. And that is what is exposed once the coral finally dies or it's pulled out of the water. What's left is a hard, basically a skeletal remain. Interestingly enough, most corals, when they die, their little structure is shown to be white, but the outside of the coral, the actual flesh of the coral, gets its color from a very tiny algae that lives in its tissue that it's actually formed a symbiotic relationship with. So coral actually gets its color from tiny algae neighbors in its skin. So one phenomenon that you sometimes tragically see in coral is called coral bleaching, and that's when either sudden changes in temperature or pollution, other external forces, put the coral under a lot of stress, and it will actually release the algae that give it its color, and it'll start to turn white. This bleaching process eventually reveals a coral's white skeleton color. This coral, in fact, all three little examples I have here today, are not examples of the regular old coral. These are what we call precious coral. And they do not occur in great big reefs, but rather they might grow in colonies or oftentimes individually down on the seabed. And they do not get their color from algae neighbors. They're actually colored by carotenoid pigments. So these guys are like tree coral. Oh man, they make a little tingly sound when they clink together. Precious coral is part of the corallium family of corals. They often have finely rigid structures like this, but they're not tough like, your bones are. They'll break very easily. They're quite fragile. They can come in quite a range of colors, from white to pinkish to the more kind of deep, almost orangey red that we have here on the table. These guys are quite pink compared to the coral skeletons over there. So some of these guys actually on the outside, they have fine little grooves that run down the length of the stems. And if you were to cut a cross section of one of these little branches, tree branches, you would actually see on the inside something like a spider's web or even like the rings on a tree. Sea tree, same as land tree. So once upon a time, most of the precious coral was dredged in the Mediterranean, but now most of it comes from south of Japan. In fact, some varieties of precious coral are deemed endangered, and there are a lot of regulations surrounding the fishing and collecting of this stuff. A lot of it is self-regulation by companies, but some places, you know, they'll do things like rotate sites that can be fished at any given time, limit the size of the coral that you can bring up, the quantities, how often it's fished, things like that. So it's quite vulnerable to overfishing. So if you are in the market to get some precious coral for yourself, you gotta make sure that you are informed, because there are, like I said, a lot of regulations, and there's also lots of imitators out there, like glass and plastic, and there's also a lot of ways to stain precious coral to change the color of it as well. So just make sure if you're out there, be informed. Knowledge is power, you know what I'm saying? All right, box number 2. I'm guessing coral? Ooh, I was right, but we got black coral. That one looks like a whole snake. And I've got a loop. Good, because I forgot mine at home again. So we've got black and gold coral today. One piece of gold coral and several really cool pieces of black coral. Black and golden coral can be found in the West Indies and in Hawaii, but it's highly regulated to fish it. And in Australia, it is straight up illegal to fish for golden coral. It's 99% likely that if you find a piece of golden coral, it has been bleached and was previously black coral. But that doesn't make it any less pretty. So when you pick up one of these pieces of black coral, you can actually kind of see underneath, there's like little glints of like bronze and like a brassy, almost gold color. So how can you identify this particular variety of coral? Get your loop, affix it to your eye, and notice the pimply surface. It is absolutely speckled and dotted. Plus, if you take a look at the end, it looks for all the world like the end of a stick, a twig, a piece of wood. That makes sense, that tracks, because this is actually completely organic material. And they look completely organic too. And they taste, no, I'm kidding. It's rigid now, but it's flexible while it's growing underwater. It's actually very similar to keratin, the things that make up your fingernails and your hair. Very little to no calcium carbonate, which makes it different from the other corals that I was talking about previously. The ancient Greeks, big fans of this stuff. In Africa, red coral beads, not unlike these, are signs of wealth. There are very few gemstones associated with as many powers and spells as coral. Of course, thought to cure all sorts of ailments, drive off madness, strengthen your baby's teeth, for crying out loud. It was also said that a piece of coral worn by someone who is sick would start to turn pale, and that if you put a little piece right above your door, it would protect your house and you inside of it, the inhabitant, from lightning strikes. I got nothing to add to that. That just kind of writes itself. Coral is one of the most ancient and oldest recorded adorning, materials as far as gems and precious and semi-precious things go. I'm talking ancient. It's been found in Celtic tombs from the Iron Age, and Tibetan monks actually use them as prayer beads. Red coral has been found in Neolithic graves and was also highly prized by ancient Chinese cultures, and it was one of the 7 treasures in Buddhist script. Next box. Ooh, very cool. Is this a guitar pick? Come on now, I wouldn't use this on a guitar. I kind of jumped the gun a little bit. This is fossilized coral, check this out. So if you can see all those little circles there, it's coral, it's fossilized coral, fossilized sea life. So when a little critter died millions of years ago, it would settle down at the bottom, covered by sediment, another layer of dead stuff, more sediment, and eventually it is compressed and entirely replaced by a mineral like agate or calcite. In this case, I'm gonna guess agate because I see a couple of veins of like that bluish gray and indeed a little spot here that just sort of I've seen in other agate formations, as well as one of those geodes that we busted open way back when. Click here if you want to watch that. And then this little fossilized guitar pick. Very similar structure to this other fossil. A little bit more flowery looking. They look kind of more like flower petals. I'm joking, this is not a guitar pick, nor would you want to use it as one. But fossilized coral is great for fashioning into cabochons and often beads and things like that. Honestly, it's a really great collector's gem. A little slice of history that you can have for your own prehistory, if we're being technical. And it's just really pretty. You can just imagine these guys swaying in the primordial soup, a billion years ago. Some thing grew legs and crawled up on land, and now I gotta pay taxes. Okay, final box. Ooh, look at that. Oh, wow, gosh. So this guy right here is Indonesian black coral, and it has been treated a little bit. It's got a coating on the outside to protect it because coral is very porous. It was a living thing after all. It did have to feed and breathe. And you can also take advantage of the porous structure of coral and dye it like we see over here. Now, one of the ways that you can kind of get a hint that coral has been dyed is that if it's got like these off-white veins that run throughout it, take your loop. I told you earlier, if you're in the market for buying coral, be educated and bring your tools, bring your loop. First of all, some of these spots of blue, you can kind of see a little bit of color saturation, places where the dye set in and really made it a very deep blue, almost an unnatural, like too blue to be true blue, you know what I mean? And then in the white veins, there's also a little bit of leaking of the dye into what would otherwise be a white vein. So just a couple little indicators. Nothing wrong with a treated gemstone. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and I find this beautiful. So if you do, get you some. It doesn't matter if it's treated or not. We're all treated one way or another. I wore braces growing up. I've been treated. Lastly, we have this guy, this bright red ring. This might be what you think of or what you imagine when you're thinking about soft coral. So I was talking about the coating on this guy. You can tell when the light bounces off of it that it kind of looks like light bouncing off of like, I don't know, like the hood of a car or something like that. Whereas this, you can see that the light is a bit mottled and it's bouncing off of a less than smooth surface. Not totally smooth. And when you loop it, it actually looks a little bit spongy. It looks like it could be soft. Though this may be referred to as soft coral. It ain't that soft. It's got a rigid aragonite skeleton, and it's actually a little bit more brittle than precious coral. As such, much coral, like actually the piece in this ring here, are impregnated with a resin to help their stability and durability and help them, you know, sit on your finger all hours of the day. Which again, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of treatment, because if this weren't treated, then we wouldn't be able to enjoy it in a ring like this. So this soft coral is also referred to as red sponge coral. So if you're out there shopping for coral jewelry and this looks like what you're looking for, look for red sponge coral. If bright, shocking red is not totally your style, this coral also comes in orange, and it can often have brown or yellow veining that goes throughout it. And honestly, because it's porous, it's also often dyed to either enhance or slightly change the color. So if you're looking to get some, it's out there, for sure. All right, guys, that's it for today. But before we go, why don't we take a closer look at one of these specimens? I think my favorite on the table, the not guitar pick. So guys, if you want to learn a little bit more about coral, you can visit our brand new website, gemstones.com, and learn about some of these brilliant specimens on the table, as well as any other gemstones you could possibly think of. Which was your favorite that we looked at today? Of course, I gotta say mine is the pick. But let me know down in the comments below, and of course, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss out on future content. Thanks for watching.